this whole journey. So I wanted to share with you, I talked about that homeless man that I met at the gas station. Well, when I was in D.C., I met homeless people a lot, but this one in particular stuck out in my mind. He was a young boy. He was 17 years old. And I went to step into a convenience store, and at the top of the steps, right before you go into the door, sat this young man. He was sitting there in the corner. And I just said, "Hey, how you doing?" And he just, "Not too good, man." And I said, "Well, what's the problem?" He said, "Man, I'm hungry." So I started talking to him. I said, "Well, come on inside. We'll get you something to eat." Now, I have never seen a mess like trying to get this boy something to eat. You walk in this place, if you want something to eat, you go to the right-hand side of the store, and you pull up on a touch screen what you want to eat, and you place your order, and it spits a receipt out at you. Then you have to make your way through, get all the way over to the other side of the store, and pay for whatever's on that receipt. And then they give you another receipt, and you take it back over to where you ordered it the first time, and wait on and pick up your food. So this whole process took me about 20 minutes just to buy this boy something to eat. But it gave me the opportunity to talk with him. And he was sharing with me how he ended up at 17 homeless. Or he might have been 16. He was very young. And what he said was he was from Washington State, and his dad was not in the picture. He didn't even know who his dad was, but his mom had moved from Washington State to Washington, D.C. to move in with this guy that she had met over the internet. And evidently, she was someone that could see no further than what she saw in that man, who was very physically abusive. Maybe not so much to her, I don't believe, but to this young man. And he said, "I took my last beating and I left." He said, "But I don't have a home and I don't have any means of supporting myself." So I got him something to eat, and we were talking about what it was that I'm doing. And again, I've got this huge pack on my back, and I'm trying to navigate through all these narrow aisles in a convenience store without being like a bull in a china shop. Because that's pretty much what I was. If I'd walk into a CVS to get something, and I'd see what I needed, and I'd turn like this to get it off that shelf, and everything on the shelf behind me would go, so it was tough. So because of that, being very careful, that gave me that extra time to talk to him. And so I asked him, where he stood with Jesus. And even at his young age, he said, "I was brought up in the church." He said, "I know who Jesus is." But he said, "In the situation that I'm in, I don't see him." And I said, "Well, have you ever thought that what I'm doing and having to stop and talk to you might be Jesus' way of getting your attention?" Jesus looked to meet people's physical needs. And then that opened their hearts. And I said, "Have you ever thought that might be what this is?" And so I was able to pray with that young man. That happened a lot. Like I said, I was able to pray with about a third of the people that I physically witnessed to. But I will not know this side of heaven how much fruit that'll actually bear. I'll never see these people again on this earth. I have to believe, though, that there was a purpose in every single interaction that I have with people. I was in a small town in South Carolina. It's called Lamar. And every Sunday night, the youth in this Methodist church cooked. And they cooked for the whole congregation. There was 200 people, maybe. And but I was going to be there on Saturday night. And so what the kids said was, "Can we move it from Sunday night to Saturday night? Can we cook a meal for the congregation and do it for Jeff and let him come and talk to us about what he's doing?" And so they agreed. So Saturday night I got there, and that was one of the churches that participated in my 27-pound weight gain. And so when I was done, and I was telling them, I don't accept donations. I don't take donations. This is not why I'm out here. I've got what I need to make this journey. I don't accept any money for myself. And so I got ready to leave, and the lady walks up to me from the church secretary, with an envelope. She said, I know you said you don't take donations, but please accept this for your journey. And I said, well, I don't do that. That's not what I'm here for. And she said, well, use it to help someone else. And so I thought about it, and I said, okay, maybe I can use it if I see somebody that's homeless. I can use it to buy them a meal, give me an opportunity to witness to them. So a few days later, I was actually in Raleigh, and I walked across this street. It was a very busy intersection. As I was walking across the street, I could see up against the telephone pole, there was a lady leaned up against that telephone pole, and she had a sign out. Well, I couldn't see. I was coming at her profile, so I couldn't see what it was, and so I got to that telephone pole that she was leaned up against and turned to go down the sidewalk past her, and I turned around to see what she was, and she turned out to be, what was it, 70-something years old. And her sign said, "Any help appreciated, God bless." Well, I'd run into that a couple of times, and it turned out to be somebody just wanting money. One guy literally told me, he said, "I'm just out here trying to get some money for beer and cigarettes." With that same sign, "Any help, God bless." To me, that's taking the Lord's name in vain. It is. It's invoking the name of the Lord to get you beer and cigarettes. This lady, however, I asked her, what could I do to help her? And she said, "I had a heart attack, and I just got released from the hospital yesterday. I can't afford to get the medication that the doctor told me I needed to be on." So I said, "Well, have you got any paperwork or anything like that?" And she said, "Yeah, I do." And so she got she had a big bag there, and she pulled out these papers, and it was her release papers from the hospital. The date was yesterday, the date before I was talking to her, and it said, you must start these medications, and there were 3 of them there. So it was legit. She did not, however, have a prescription. And so I told her, I said, "Do you think a drugstore will fill this prescription with this?" She said, "I don't know." And I said, and it just so happened there was a Walgreens right across the street, right at that intersection. I said, "Let's go over there and see what they'll do." So we went over there. I talked to the pharmacist and asked her if we could get this prescription filled with these release papers. And so she called the doctor, and they said, "No, they will not. You have to have an actual prescription." And she's telling me this, and I said, "You need to tell her." And she said, "Oh, I thought you were her caregiver or something." I said, "Man, I met this lady like 3 minutes ago. I told her what I was doing, and I told her why I had that lady in there." She said, "You know what? I'm a Christian too." She said, "Let's see what we can do for this lady." So she got on the phone. This pharmacist got on the phone, and she ended up spending like an hour and 20 or an hour and 30 minutes back and forth with the hospital and talking to different doctors until she finally found one that remembered that lady being in there and was able to pull up her records and see that she had prescriptions ordered, but she just somehow had either lost it or wasn't aware that she'd gotten it or was not given a prescription. So that doctor said, "Yes, fill these prescriptions for her." So they filled them, and I was able to get those prescriptions for her. But I wouldn't have if it hadn't been for that church that made me take those donations for that lady. I wouldn't have been able to do that because her prescriptions were expensive, and I could not have gotten. She didn't have insurance or anything. It's not like a copay. She needed her medicine paid for. I would not have had that money. It would have just been me. So that was just another thing that, this stuff is not random. It's just not random. There was nothing that happened on this trip that I thought was random. From the day I started walking, I knew I was going to end up in Vermont. That was going to be my final stop, was Vermont. Now, I used to live there, and I have some friends there, and there were several that I wanted to see while I was there. So I started praying for these people, that the opportunity would come up for me to find an open door somewhere to witness to these people, because every one of them had either not ever been to church, or it had been more than 20 years. All of them were adamant in the fact that they wanted nothing to do with God. Absolutely nothing. When I lived there, most of my acquaintances were non-believers. So there was a group. There were 5 people. 2 lived in Glens Falls, New York, that I knew I was going to see. The other 3 lived in Burlington. So I started praying for these 5 people. And so as I'm walking, I thought, well, I want to go back and worship in the church that I attended while I was in Burlington. Just a little small country Adventist church. So I called the pastor, and I said, I'm coming to Burlington. I'm going to be camping. Can anybody in that church come and pick me up at the campground, take me to church? He said, well, I'm going to be at camp meeting in Maine that week, so I won't be there. But he said, I'm sure we can find somebody. What's going to bring you to Vermont? And so I told him what I was doing. He said, well, you know, I'm not going to be there that week. And so we talked about it, and it turns out that I ended up with the pulpit for the service that Saturday. So I went back and I called all of those people. I'd stayed in touch with them via Facebook, so they all knew I was coming. They all knew we were going to get together and do something at some point for however short a time. All 5 of these people that had absolutely no desire to have anything to do with church, did not believe in God at all, I invited every one of them to church. Every one of them showed up. Again, I don't know what, how much growth the seeds that were planted will do. I won't know this side of heaven. But I know that there was a reason that all 5 of those people, one girl told me, she said, okay, well, I'll come, but don't be surprised if I don't burst into flames just inside the door. I told her, I said, I'll try and get you out before your hair starts singeing. But it was, I mean, these people showed up and came and heard what I had to say about the fact that Jesus loves us so much that he's looking for people to save. This is not things that I did. These are not things that I did. These are things the Lord orchestrated, and how humbling that was to watch how he intersected my path with the path of those that he wanted me to talk to. I walked into a little, I think it was a Hardee's or something like that down in Florida. Early one morning, I wanted some orange juice. And so I walked in, and as soon as I walked in the door, I'm like, man, why did I pick this spot? There were 4 cash registers, and there were probably 8 or 10 people in line in front of each of those cash registers. And I thought, man, it'll be lunchtime before I get my orange juice. But I went in, stood in line, and right behind me was like this bar seating area. And the other side of it was a gentleman eating a biscuit. And so I'm standing there in line, and he goes, hey man, you going hiking or something? Because again, I've got this great big backpack on. And so I turned around and said, well, yeah, kind of something like that. And so I told him what I was doing, and we started talking. And during our conversation, my comments led around to some of my past history with substance abuse and things like that. And when I started talking about that, he started crying. He said, man, I'm dealing with that right now, and I can't get this off of my back. And so I was telling him, I said, man, you can. I did. And if I can, anybody can. I said, the Lord will give you that victory, but you have to ask him for it. You have to want it. And for a while, I wore a button right here on my shirt that said, do you mind if I pray with you? And he saw that, and he said, man, would you pray with me? And I said, absolutely, I will. So right there, standing in line, waiting to order my orange juice, I prayed with that young man. And when I was done again, he was just bawling. Well, then I got my orange juice finally, and I went over and sat down. I sat in the booth that was right beside the door that goes out. And when he finished his biscuit, he started out the door, and he stopped me, asked me something. I don't remember what it was he asked me. But I said, sit down, man. We got time. Sit down here and we'll talk. So we talked for about 30 minutes. He was about 18, 19 years old. His name was Mark. And Mark Sanchez. And he was telling me, one of the things that was on his heart that he was so troubled about was he was about to go to jail. He had been on probation and had failed his last 2 drug tests. And he was going to jail for 9 months, and he was scared. I said, well, I'll tell you something, man. From where you're sitting right now, this might not be, your brightest outlook. But I said, you're looking at it through your eyes. Look at it through God's eyes. You're going to jail, and you're going to be in there for 9 months. And when you come out, you're going to have been clean for 9 months and sober for 9 months. You're going to come out with a 9-month clean platform to stand on. I said, this might be the greatest blessing the Lord has ever placed at your feet. And look at it like that. And man, he got up and bounded out of there. You could just tell his whole outlook had changed. And again, this is not me doing this stuff. There's no words that I could speak to change anybody's mind about anything. This is the Holy Spirit working through I guess using me. I'm a vessel, I guess. I tried to tell Mom, why me? I might be a vessel, but I'm so busted up. And I am. But he used me. He used me to talk to these people. And there are people, they're looking. These people are looking for something to fill that hole that's in their heart that can only be filled with what it was designed to be filled with. We were all designed with that spot for Christ. And if we don't have Christ there's an empty spot that we try to fill it with substances, alcohol, drugs, cars, houses, relationships, whatever it is we're trying to fill that hole with, it don't get filled unless you've got Christ in your heart, in that spot. And people are looking and they are unaware that that's what they're looking for. They don't know. Even people, I met people that, I met a lot of people in the Catholic faith. I met a lady in a produce stand down in Florida. And I just stopped in there because I wanted something, orange or something like that. And so I walked in and the only thing they would sell me was like a bunch. But they had free orange juice samples and pineapple juice samples. So I knocked back a few of those and was talking to that lady, and she asked me why. So I told her what I was doing. And so I said, do you have a relationship with Jesus right now? And she said, yes, I do. And I said, really? And she was telling me, I go to the whatever the name of the Catholic church was. And I said, so do you read the Bible? And she said, absolutely. And I said, well, I only asked that because I met a lady one time who told me, we were talking about Scripture, and she said, well, I'm Catholic, we don't read the Bible. She said, oh, no, we read the Bible. Father so-and-so tells us exactly what's in there. And I said, so you read it pretty regular? Oh, yeah. But she said, I got a question for you. I said, okay, what is it? She said, who gave who the fruit? Did Adam give it to Eve, or did Eve give it to Adam? She said, me and my friend argue about that all the time. So I don't know how closely she's reading the Bible. But it's not very. But I run into that a lot. I ran into that a lot. People that, that they rely on other people to tell them what the Bible says, and you can't do that. You cannot do that. You've got to get in there and find out for yourself. Because the day's going to come, you ain't going to be able to stand there and say, well, so-and-so told me, that's not going to fly. That's not going to fly. I met another gentleman in Baltimore. I was going to climb the original Washington Monument is in Baltimore. Did you know that?
It is.
Okay. Well, I was standing outside of it, getting ready to go up inside it, waiting for my tour to start. There was a gentleman standing there, and I guess it was just he and I were going to be on that tour. And it's self-guided. It's not really a tour. It's just they take our money and you can go up in it. So I'm standing out there, and we started talking. And I've got my ever-present backpack on my back. And so I told him what I was doing. He asked me why, of course, and told him what I was doing. And I asked him about his relationship with Jesus. Are you a Christian? Yes, I am. I go to the such and such Catholic church. And so I asked him. I said, so do you read the Bible? He said, well, I haven't been, but I want to tell you something. He said, I got this thing in the mail for Bible studies. And I didn't get around to asking him where it came from. But he said, I ordered it. And so me and 4 or 5 other guys from my church have been meeting once a week down in the basement and studying the Bible. He says, man, you wouldn't believe the stuff in there. I said, yes, I would. I said, yes, I would. I said, you keep reading it. And you pray over that. And the Lord will lead you on the path you need to be on. And that's as far as I got because the lady came to take our money. But I ran into that all the time. All the time I ran into people that I guess in their hearts they knew or they thought they knew what was in the Bible. But that, if you'd have seen the look on that guy's face when he was talking about the things that he had come across in the Bible that evidently the priest had never told him. The whole story of salvation. Opportunities for not just to witness, but to actually do many in-depth Bible studies came up. I visited a Reformed church. I'd never even heard of a Reformed church before I started putting this walk together. But I was going through a fairly rural area along the Hudson River and came across this Reformed church, and I called them to see if I could come spend the night. They said, absolutely, come on. So I get to the church, and it was an older couple. They were in their 80s, I guess. Maybe not quite that old. Maybe they weren't older. Sorry, Mom. I keep very careful with that. Uh, anyway, and so they came and got me and took me from at the church and took me up the road to their home. That was on a Sabbath afternoon. And so the next morning, I went to church with them. I'd never heard of a Reformed church. I wanted to see what it was. And they were between pastors, so they had a guest pastor there. And so I don't know where he came from, but he was a pastor at a Reformed church. And he came and he spoke, and one of the things that he talked about was how we can live godly lives. And he said, it's really fairly simple. He said, God has given us the guidelines that he wants us to live by. So he starts paraphrasing the Ten Commandments. He said, this is how we do it. This is how we live the life God wants us to live. So he starts paraphrasing them. And he's going them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when he got to the fourth one, he said, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days. And I mean, he did the whole thing. He paraphrased it. He said, the seventh day is a Sabbath day. We're instructed to keep it holy. If you do that, you'll have the rest you need. And we're sitting in a Reformed church. Nobody caught that. And afterwards, we had like a small, they served like tea and brownies or whatever. And then we went out the door and went to these people's houses because I had to still walk the rest of that day. So we got to their house. We sat down and they were going to serve me lunch before we left. And so we're talking, and I told them I really enjoyed the sermon this morning. They said, yeah, we did too. He's pretty good. We might have him come back again. I said, you know, he really caught my attention when he was telling us how God instructed us how to live godly lives. And they said, yeah, the Ten Commandments. I said, yeah, do you believe in them? And they said, absolutely. I said, well, you know, he was talking about keeping the Sabbath holy. And I said, 6 days you work and the seventh day you rest. And the guy got really mad really quick. He said, well, sometimes you have to work on Sunday. And I said, well, I understand that, but you know, Saturday is the seventh day of the week. How do you relate that? And he said, you're going to have to talk to somebody more knowledgeable than me. But those opportunities, I stayed in a place in New Jersey, I guess. I got to this church and they were having a funeral. When I got to this church that I was supposed to stay at, they were having a funeral. And they said, well, you can go stay downstairs or whatever. And so I did. And then the people I was going to stay with, came pick me up and took me to their home. And they too were an elderly couple, probably in their 70s. Sorry. I don't know how else to say that.
I know I'm old, so just...
Anyway, so...
Me too. You're offending me.
Oh my goodness. Well, we're just sit down. Well, I'm digging myself a hole up here. Anyway, so I went to their home. And that evening we were having dinner and their grandson came over. And after dinner we sat around and were talking, and the guy said, my grandson has, he used to go to church, but he said he's got so many questions. And so I said, well, okay, shoot, And so he said, he sits down and looks at me and says, what happens to people when they die? First thing, boom, right out of the gate, And so I said, well, that's a long answered question that I can get into with you if you'd like. But the short answer is, they sleep until Christ comes and calls them back to life. He said, well, that's what I've always thought, but every church I've ever been to tells me you either go to heaven or you go to hell. But he said, that's not what I read. And he said, what was it? He had 3 questions. The first one was what happened when he died. Second one, what about the mark of the beast? Boom, And so I was explaining to him about that. I don't even remember now what the third one was. But we ended up sitting there until well after dark. So the opportunity came up so many times for me to pretty much give a Bible study on many, many topics in a very condensed period of time. And again, I know these seeds of truth were planted. Not through anything. Who was it I was talking to just a little while ago in there? I was talking to somebody and they said, I was surprised at how much I was able to. It was one of the ladies from Greenville was telling me, she said, I was surprised at how much is actually in my head until people start asking me questions. And I said, well, if it's in there, And you need it. The Holy Spirit will cover that for you, but it's got to be in there first. It's got to be in there first, or you'll never be able to tell anybody about it. I remember I walked up to a bus stop one time, and this was still in Florida. I walked up to a bus stop. Shelby, you leaving?
Yeah, I am.
Nice to meet you. I'll see you next
Good to
Saturday.
be here.
I'll see you next Saturday.
Yeah, good to be here.
Yeah.
Good. I love being here.
Unless what's his name runs me off. Man. Not you.
That's fine.
The hurricane coming.
Well, I'm not going to be here either if the Lord comes.
True.
Neither will you be.
That's true.
Hope we'll be at the same place.
Yes, exactly.
Good report.
Anyway, so I walked up to a bus stop. I still had that button that said, "Do you mind if I pray with you?" And this guy walked up, and he walked up with a purpose. And he said, "I passed you on the sidewalk there a while ago. Saw your button. Said, 'Do you mind if I pray with you?'" He said, "Are you a Christian kind of person?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I'm a Christian person." He said, "What do you think about the mark of the beast?" I mean, what do these people come from? You know, they just approach somebody on the sidewalk and ask them about the mark of the beast. And so I told him. And I told him where it describes the characteristics of the beast power and, you know, all of this stuff. And he stood there like this the whole time. And for probably 45 minutes. So those opportunities showed up so many times that I was able to not just walk up and try to tell people about Jesus, but people wanted in-depth knowledge about very important and you know, big topics. And but I can tell you there was only one time. And I don't have notes up here, so if I'm floundering a little bit, you'll just have to forgive me. I didn't have notes this morning either. So I had a couple of reminders here, but I haven't talked about any of them yet. There was only one time where I was ever greeted harshly. I walked up to, I always used convenience stores or fast food places to refill my water bottle with ice. You can go into their fountains and just fill it up with ice. So I was walking up to a Burger King, and there was a guy standing outside the door, and he said, "Okay, man, why?" And I said, "Well, this stands for," asked me who he is. He said, Who is? And I said, "Well, let's think about it for a minute." And we did, and he goes, "Wait a minute. Is this kind of some kind of God thing?" And I said, Yeah, it is. He said, "I want to tell you something. You're so effing this, GD this," just on and on and on, just expletive out of his mouth, just screaming at me like spit coming out of the corner of his mouth. And so I just stood there and listened to him. And I said, "Wow, you're pretty passionate about this, ain't you?" He said, "Yeah, I'm passionate because you're so stupid. You believe all that crap," and on and on and on. And I said, "Well," I just let him go. I never raised my voice, never nothing. I just stood there and let him holler. And I said, "Well, come on, man, let's go in there and get you something to eat." He said, "No." He quieted down. He said, "No, I probably offended you." I said, "Man, you stood here and screamed at me for 10 minutes and you haven't offended me yet. Let's go in and get you something to eat." He said, "No, I'm screaming at you because you're so good." And he started right back up again. So when he was done, I just said, "Man, my name is Jeff. I hope you have a good day." And let him go. That was the only negative experience that I had. I would tell people what I was doing, and when I got around to asking them about Jesus, you know, they might hold up their hand and say, "I don't want to hear about that." But they were respectful. They were respectful about it. That one guy was the only one that ever gave me any kind of negative attitude. I walked through places that, you know, pretty sketchy neighborhoods. Miami was horrible, and, you know, Fort Lauderdale, that whole Florida in general. The cities that I walked through. Raleigh, you know, some of the places in Raleigh were pretty sketchy. DC, Baltimore, you know, all of them up through there were pretty bad. I was never afraid. I saw things that you can't unsee. Some of the stuff that's going on. I also saw a pretty big example of what this world is like right now as far as extremes. I was walking down a sidewalk in Miami, actually, and I'm a car fanatic. I love cars. You know, Range Rovers and Jaguars and Porsches and Ferraris. I love and here's just a steady stream of Bentleys and Maseratis and all of these cars, and I'm just drooling, you know, as they go by. And I have to look down a side street here, and on both sides of the street, for as far as I can see, were homeless people. Here are cars going by, some of them $500,000 a piece, and on this side of people have nothing, absolutely nothing. What extremes in that one exact same spot, probably 30 feet from each other, a steady stream of both. It was heart-wrenching. Only
I wanted you to tell them about that man Saturday.
Oh, man, thank you for that. Well, only when Jesus comes back will the equality. You know, because right now this world is not, it's just not a good place. But what Mom is talking about, what's the name of that town? It's in Georgia. It's in Georgia. It's the oldest town in Georgia. I can't remember what the name of it is. Anyway, I started walking into town, and they were having the Blessing of the Fleet. It was a big Catholic beer fest, basically is what it was. They were blessing all the fishing boats that come in. So I'm walking up towards, there's a bridge that goes across the river, and then there's the town. So I'm walking up the street, and I looked ahead, and there's a car sitting there on the side of the road. It had been sitting there for a while. You know, this is just across from the Florida line, so it's still flat. So I'm looking, I can see that car sitting up on the side of the road. It sat there and sat there and sat there. And I finally got up to it, and I got pretty close to it, and this guy gets out, walks across the street, and comes up to me, and he sees my shirt. And he said, "What does that mean?" And so I told him, he said, "What, are you like evangelizing or something?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Man, you're the one I've been waiting for." I said, "What do you mean?" Now, take this at face value. This is what he told me. The Lord told me this morning to pull off on the side of the road and wait. This is what he told me. And he said, "You're the one I've been waiting for." He said, "I've got some questions." And it turns out he had been an addict for 8 or 10 years. But he'd been clean for how many days now? Was it 12 days? Something like that. Less than 2 weeks he'd been clean. And he had spent that entire 12 days reading the Bible and taking notes. And he had a whole, like a spiral notebook full of notes. I mean, just page after page after page of things that the Bible said. And what I read of it, he was spot on. He was spot on in what the Bible said. And so he said, "Can I take you to your motel?" It's about a mile away. I said, "Sure." So on the way to this motel, we pulled in. He said, "I really only got one question for you." I said, "What's that?" He holds up an empty, like a plastic wrapper, like a peppermint or something would come in, a clear plastic wrapper. He holds it up like this. He said, "If I say I'm going to give this to you, how would you get it from me?" I said, "Well, I'd take it." He said, "Exactly, exactly." He said, "That's what I've been trying to get figured out. Jesus is offering us this gift, but we have to take it. We have to accept it." And I said, "That's right." And he said, that's all I need to know, man." I don't know why he couldn't get that out of all his study. But the fact that he was waiting there for me, that he was waiting there for me, I mean, that's kind of sent chills up my back. But that's exactly what he told me. That he'd been sitting there waiting because God told him to wait. He said, "You're the one I've been waiting on." He said, "As soon as I saw your shirt, I knew you were the one I was waiting on." I mean, wow. You know, it was crazy. Let me see if there was one more here I want to share with you. That might be all. I believe it is. That's all I want to share with you, I think, except, I don't know if you guys knew, I never made it to Canada. Did you know that? I cut my trip short. When I got just past Glens Falls, I got up into Lake George area in New York. Before I got there, I used to have this friend when I lived in Vermont. His name is Bruce. He's a raging alcoholic, and he struggles with it. I mean, he struggles with it worse than I ever did. And I was in contact with him. I'd call him occasionally, and then for a while I couldn't get an answer. And to me, that always is a signal that he has lapsed. So for a while I couldn't reach him, and then I did. And he said the reason he couldn't reach me is because I've been in the hospital. He said, "I've been in the ICU for the last 5 days, They had to keep me in the ICU because they couldn't get my bodily functions, breathing, pulse, blood pressure, sugar rate, everything stabilized. But if they hadn't found me and taken me to the hospital, and they did, I'd have died. And he said I almost died while I was in the hospital from his excessive drinking. He has also been clinically depressed since he was 12 years old or something. And as an adult, if something happens, it sends him into a bout of depression, then he drinks because he's depressed. And then he's depressed because he drank. And then he drinks because he's even more depressed, and so he drinks more. And anyway, it's just a spiral. When he starts, he doesn't stop until he's at the bottom. I had a really good friend that I didn't go see before he died. I had an opportunity to go see him a day before he died, and his wife called me and said, Junior's died. Now, he had been my best friend for almost 40 years, and I missed the opportunity to go see him before he died. When Bruce told me what had happened to him, I didn't want that to happen. And I started feeling this tugging, this pulling in my heart, that maybe now is the time. That if I go see Bruce, maybe I can encourage him. So I got on Greyhound and went from Lake George to Ohio. And that was rough. That was a 50-some hour round trip bus ticket. Greyhound is a cheap way to travel. It ain't the most comfortable. But I went out there and I stayed there for 4 days. The reason I felt fairly confident that there would be some good done is because, now this is a lengthy story, but keep up with me if you can. This will be the last one, I promise. I was in a little town in Virginia and had made arrangements with a congregation in an Episcopal church for me to spend the night. When I got there, the town was about the size of this room, and there was that one Episcopal church was the only church, and it was built in the 1870s or 1880s, really old church. And I met the lady, she came, she let me in, showed me where I was going to be sleeping, and it was a nursery. The room I was going to sleep in was a nursery, and it had a glass wall, and then a hallway on the other side of that glass wall. So she told me, how to get in and out if I wanted to go somewhere, leave this door open, blah, blah, blah. And she also told me that the lights out in the hallway were motion activated. She said, now, if you get up in the middle of the night and you go to the kitchen for a drink or you go to the restroom or something, that light's going to come on. If somebody is driving by the road, doesn't know you're here, and sees those lights come on in the church, you're going to get company. I said, that's fine. So I laid down and I went to sleep, and all of a sudden there's these lights in my eyes. And I'm like, what? I didn't do this. And so I sat there for a minute waiting on somebody to come in. Nobody ever did. So finally they went back off. And about 10 minutes later, they came back on again. Then they went back off. And about 20 minutes later, they came on again. It was just random. Between 10 and 20 minutes, these motion sensor lights would come on in the hallway. I like to think maybe it was a mouse. I don't know what it was that was setting them off. Maybe it was a short in the wiring. I don't know. But for whatever reason, I got no sleep. So about 5 o'clock, I thought, this is it. I'm just going to get up and start walking. So I did. I started about 5:30 in the morning, which put me at my next day's destination way early. And it was at a little small Methodist church in Beaver Dam, Virginia. And so I got there because I left so early. I got there early. I got there 5 minutes till 11. So I was in time for the service. Now, at the very last minute that week, the pastor of that church had heard from her daughter that she hadn't seen in I don't know how long, she lived out in California or somewhere, saying, I'm going to be in Myrtle Beach for this amount of days. Is there any way you can come down and spend this time with me? So at the very last minute, the pastor ducked out of her sermon duties and contacted these other two guys and said, would you come have the service? Now, these other two guys were pastors who ran a place called New Life Ranch. It was a recovery center, set out way out in the middle of nowhere. And what they did is these two pastors came, and they brought 4 guys with them that were attendees at this New Life Ranch. And they came and gave their testimonies, and their testimonies really resonated with me because they echoed so much of my own life. So after the service, I was talking to them, told them what I was doing, told them why, told them a little bit about my past history. And he said, would you mind coming tomorrow morning? He said, we have worship service every morning. Would you mind coming out here to the ranch and sharing your testimony with these guys? I said, absolutely, I will. 7:30 the next morning, I was out there at the ranch, and like I said, they had worship service every morning. I walked in there and stood in the back of the room, and I was there about 10 minutes, and I was a puddle. I can't remember a more powerful worship service in my recent life's history. Here this room is full of 65 or 70 guys, all of them in various stages of recognizing that Jesus is their only hope of recovering from the substance abuse issues they have. Hands in the air, praising God for the fact that they are in that place and worshiping Him. Music, and it was amazing. Well, then I got up and I talked for about, how long do I usually talk? A long time. Probably 45 minutes I talked. And I told them, I said, look, I am living, breathing proof that God is still in the miracle business. That if He can give me victory over this, you guys are all. And I was very impressed with that place. Their methods, it's been in business since they've been in business for 40 some years. So they've got a very high success rate. And I think it's because, as opposed to things like Alcoholics Anonymous or Al-Anon or things like that, who base their strategy on belief in a higher power, the ranch names it. It is Jesus Christ. That's where they say their victory comes from. And I was just very impressed with that. And because of that, that's what I went to Ohio armed with for Bruce. And I spent that time with him out there for 4 days, and I couldn't ever figure out how to start that. I'm not a counselor. And so I just finally told him, the day I left on a Sunday, so Sabbath, we spent the whole day riding around looking at covered bridges and stuff like that in Ohio. And I finally just told him, I said, man, I'm going to tell you this as a friend, but I said, you've got to have some help. You've got to have some help. And so I told him about the ranch. And I said, what would be your biggest obstacles to going to a place like that? Fear of the unknown and fear of losing my place to live. And I said, well, I'll tell you something. If you do what you did a couple weeks ago, again, you're going to meet the unknown. And you're going to lose your place to live and probably your life. And he said, and so we talked about it, and he said, that may actually give me inspiration for what to do with my life, what my life's calling is. So I left there with him being hopeful and with me being very grateful that I had the opportunity to go out there, because I had the opportunity due to people willing to support that extra leg of my journey. And unfortunately, he has not taken advantage of that. And I don't know why that is. But because I felt pulled so strongly to go out there. But I was able to share the New Life Ranch with 2 other people. Again, I don't know if they took part in it or not, but I believe I was kept from sleeping the night before I went to that Methodist church. I believe that pastor was pulled away from her pulpit at just the last minute so that I could meet these people that ran that New Life Ranch. I know there was a purpose there. I don't believe things like this happen randomly, and I still am telling people about that place. It's not Adventist-based, but I don't really care. It is God-based, and it's a wonderful facility, and I believe it's powerful, very powerful. But that's why I didn't make it to Canada, because I took a bus from New York to Ohio, and then I went straight from Ohio to Vermont. And last leg of my journey, those people in Glens Falls said, how you getting home from Vermont? And I said, well, I'm going to take the bus, which was my plan. And they said, no, my wife and I would like to come up to Burlington and pick you up while you're there and drive you back to North Carolina. So I was gifted. And I had to think about that. I told him, I said, that's like 15 hours in the back seat of your luxury SUV versus 36 hours in an old smelly Greyhound bus. It took me like 8 seconds to make that decision. But yeah, so I was blessed with a wonderful end to that journey. I was so watched over on this whole trip. It's unbelievable. And I assure you, again, like I said earlier, I assure you and I encourage you to believe that if you are out there and you pray for the Lord to put somebody in your path to witness to, He's going to answer that prayer and He's going to take care of you. And I hope that's enough. I'm just about talked out. Believe it or not, you may not believe that. I am talked out.